Hey, good afternoon to you. It's now 4:06, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up this hour, Jerry Dunleavy chats with us about the consequences of the opioid crisis for the organizations that made that awful situation possible. Jerry, ahead. And then Congressman Andrew Clyde is here at 5 o'clock. We talked to him about Washington, D.C., and how quickly Black Lives Matter Plaza might be paved over, make it normal again. Reopen the street. Let people use the streets here in the nation's capital. It's also crazy. You can join us at 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. We are keeping our eyes on the news of a shooting in Madison, Wisconsin. Apparently a student at a Christian school is believed to have been the gunman or woman, or boy or girl, presumably, who opened fire. They say 3 are dead, including the shooter. There were wild kind of reports, numbers earlier, 5 dead. It's just one of those things. Like, the early reports are invariably wrong, and we're learning some more details. Although, in a report from about an hour ago, take a listen to this. This is the local police chief in Madison, Wisconsin, saying that they don't actually know the gender of the shooter.
They never fired their weapons.
That is correct.
Correct.
Let's follow that one question.
I don't know if it's a male or female, but the police department did not fire their weapons. Thank you.
I don't know if it's a male or a female, but the police department did not fire their weapons. That was the Madison, Wisconsin police chief about an hour ago. So they're providing more and more updates here as things move along. We'll share them with you but I do see immediately the left is calling for gun control again. Once again, trying to deprive law-abiding citizens of their rights in the wake of this because of the decisions of someone to use a gun illegally. And did you notice that they didn't do this for Luigi Mangione, the assassin in the streets of New York? Did you notice? Where was the gun control conversation after that? There wasn't really one, was there? There was just a lot of cheering from the left. They dug it. They kind of liked it. They're like, look at Luigi. Hey, will you take the on-screen graphic down? Let's get a closer look at his abs. We like this guy. Remember, that was CNN. Yeah, it's demented. It's totally demented. Instead of we need to figure out what's going on with the guns. We need to go after the guns. That's normally what they do. But apparently, if they support the cause of the assassin, no conversation about gun control. That would get in the way of assassinations, in fact. So let's not do that. Right. It is kind of nutty. It's very nutty. So on that front, this why do people support assassinations? Why do lefties support assassinations? Well, to give you more of a sense of the numbers, Scott Rasmussen today has a very troubling tweet up on the data. There's a news survey that just came out from Napolitan News is the name of the outfit. And they say that 10% of voters nationwide consider the man who murdered the United Healthcare CEO to be a hero. 10%. 1 in 10 poll respondents thought that the guy would think the guy is a hero. That same survey found that 53% consider him to be a villain. 22% say neither label applies. And 15% are not sure. We have some confused Americans, to put it mildly. On a related question, 13% of the respondents said it's sometimes justifiable to murder someone, like United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, as a means to bring about important societal change. The survey found that 71% of people disagree with that and say murder like that is never justifiable. The most likely to say that such murder is sometimes justifiable, are you ready for the demographics? Young voters, 34%. Progressive Democrats, 29%. People who talk politics every day, 24%. And those with a postgraduate degree, 21%. 21%. So in other words, young, overeducated, lefty politics obsessives are the most likely to endorse assassinations in the United States of America. Now, that, of course, is not a way to bring about societal stability. That's how you provoke chaos. That's how you provoke chaos. It's also not the first survey we've seen like this. We've seen surveys in the past. The SPLC, even a lefty organization themselves, put out a survey a couple years ago. I don't have the data in front of me, but it showed a shocking number of young Democrats support political assassinations as a means to achieve their goals, their political goals, which is really crazy. Now, President Trump was asked today about the assassination of the United Healthcare CEO, and he was unequivocal. He said it was terrible.
United Healthcare shooting, the shooting of the CEO in New York. Can you give us your thoughts about that? And what do you make of the reaction around the suspected shooter? Does that tell you anything about how people
I think it's a
healthcare?
terrible thing. I think it's really terrible that some people seem to admire him, like him. And I was happy to see that it wasn't specific to this gentleman that was killed. It's just an overall sickness as opposed to a specific sickness. That was a terrible thing. It was cold-blooded, just a cold-blooded, horrible killing. And how people can like this guy is, that's a sickness, actually. That's really very bad, especially the way it was done. It was so bad, right in the back. And very bad, very thing like that. You can't believe that some people, and maybe it's fake news. I don't know. It's hard to believe that that can even be thought of. But it seems that there's a certain appetite for him. I don't get it. Yeah, please.
Before the media spin that last line about fake news, he's not saying that the murder itself was fake news. He's saying that maybe he's holding out hope that not so many Americans actually do support the assassin. Maybe that part is fake news, said President Trump. Does anything stand out in that audio to you? There was one thing that stood out to me. His critique of the way that it was done. It was like, it was that horrible. He shot him in the back, he said. That's a commentary on cowardice. That's what President Trump was doing. It was a commentary on cowardice. It's not an endorsement of some other way to assassinate the guy. It was an emphasis that talk about how cowardly this guy was. Didn't even face the man he killed. He waited till he walked past him and he shot him in the back like a coward. That was an added assessment here from President Trump today. It is madness that there are people out there who are supporting this and offering rationales for it. All right, so that's what's happening with that, and the data on assassinations going on in the United States. I was talking about President Trump's comments involving RFK Jr. today. RFK Jr. arrived at the United States Senate a short while ago. He's begun his meetings, apparently, with U.S. senators as he's set to take the helm at the Department of Health and Human Services. We have too many agencies. I need to get rid of them. I almost said Homeland Health and Human Services. Just get rid of them for my convenience. That's right, so I can name them. Here's President Trump today talking about RFK Jr. as the press is trying to make this into a big scandal.
Can I follow up on Robert Kennedy? He's on the Hill today. He's meeting with senators. What do you say to people who are worried that his views on vaccines will translate into policies that will make their kids less safe?
No, I think he's going to be much less radical than you would think. I think he's got a very open mind, or I wouldn't have put him there. He's going to be very much less radical. But there are problems. I mean, we don't do as well as a lot of other nations, and those nations use nothing. And we're going to find out what those problems are. And another thing that came up, the dinner was fascinating because I had Bobby and I had, again, the head of Pfizer. You know who that is. He's a highly respected man who has run an incredible company. Likewise with Lilly, the top two people. And
Eli Lilly and Pfizer. Can you imagine that dinner? So President Trump has RFK Jr. sit down with the heads of Pfizer and Eli Lilly at the same dinner just to hash things out. This is not a man who's just trying to make nice. He's trying to get things done. He's not even president of the United States yet. He's calling in the heads of the biggest pharmaceutical companies on the planet and say, okay, sit down with RFK. Let's hash it out. Let's get to work now.
We had the head of the industry also. So all companies were
He probably means pharma.
represented. And I said, let's have it out now a little bit. And you know what came out of that meeting is that we're paying far too much because we're paying much more than other countries. And we have laws that make it impossible to reduce. And we have a thing called the middleman,
Right, yeah. So this is where what he's referencing, we're paying more than other countries. Like in the United States, there are prescriptions that people are paying a lot more for than those same companies sell those prescriptions for in other countries. These are American medicines.
The middleman, right? The horrible middleman that makes more money, frankly, than the drug companies, and they don't do anything except they're a middleman. We're going to knock out the middleman. I'm going to be very unpopular after that statement.
Mr. President,
I don't know who these middlemen are, but they are rich as hell. And we're going to knock out the middlemen. We're going to get.
So this is important. What he's saying here, the reason he's talking about middlemen, this is what the pharmaceutical industry is blaming for the cost of drugs. They're saying that the pharmacy benefit managers, the middlemen, are elevating the cost of drugs across the country, and they're who you should target your ire towards when you say, "Man, these drugs are really expensive." So President Trump is actually, this is an art. What you're watching is an art of the deal process, because on one hand he's got RFK saying, "Hey, we're not." We've got agencies who are totally captured by the pharmaceutical industry, who are not giving these drugs the scrutiny they deserve, who are not actually protecting Americans to the level that they should be protected, and not being forthcoming with the problems that exist with some of these drugs. All drugs have side effects, and they're not being quite as forthcoming as they should be. Today, we're going to talk about the opioid crisis, and one of the big lessons from the opioid crisis was that the FDA was captured by the opioid industry such that the opioids didn't come with warnings on them that said they were addictive. And that's because the FDA was captured by that industry. Can't have that. You can't have that. You need full transparency, full disclosure. And so on one hand, it's about safety for consumers, for patients. On the other hand, the president's saying, okay, look, I'm going to take the pharmaceutical industry seriously. They say they can get control of costs by getting rid of what they refer to as the middlemen. Fine, let's do it. So here he is, art of the deal style, saying, I'm going to tackle both sides of this.
Rich as hell. And we're going to knock out the middleman. We're going to get drug costs down at levels that nobody has ever seen before. And that really, I tell you, we spent more time talking about that with Bobby and with the executives and Oz, all of them. We spent more time talking about that than anything else.
Can I ask a follow-up?
Thanks, President Trump. What about the polio vaccine?
Well, I'm a big believer in it, and I think everything should be looked at, but I'm a big...
Okay, so let me tell you why they're doing this. They want to make it seem like that RFK is a lunatic, that he's going to try and yank every possible vaccine ever made, ever, that will be set back to the Stone Age. It's the same party that supports getting your power from the wind. They want to set up windmills as a basis to energize your community, and the windmills will never keep up. That's an old form. That's a regressive form of energy. Wind is what powered the transatlantic slave trade. Wind is literally like how ships used to set. Wind used to get the mills going. That's literally what they are, windmills, right? So that's a regressive form of energy. And what they want to approach you and say, well, look at how far, RFK wants to take us back. He wants to take us back. And these media companies, which, by the way, many of them are very captured by the pharmaceutical industry to begin with. Remember we played some of the supercuts here. Remember Tucker's old program on Fox? He played the supercut. This segment brought to you by Pfizer. Good Morning America brought to you by Pfizer. Brought to you by Pfizer. Over and over and over again. All the very same places that were saying, get the jab, don't ask any questions, put on your mask, stay socially distant, lock up your kids, don't go to school. Brought to you by Pfizer. So the press wants to try and create something out of nothing here. Oh, he's going to get rid of the polio vaccine. He's going to get rid of the smallpox vaccine. He's going to slow your roll. All he's asking for is an accurate assessment of the data for the adults who make up the American public.
Big believer in the polio vaccine,
the
Salk vaccine.
Do you think schools should mandate vaccines? Do you think schools should mandate vaccines?
I don't like mandates. I'm not a big mandate person. So, I was against mandates. Mostly Democrat governors did the mandates, and they did a very poor thing. It was, in retrospect, they made a big mistake.
Why should schools mandate vaccines at all? Why should they be in the business of declaring what injections your child should get, right? I realize, like, so the United States military is going to be a very different thing. You forego a lot of your traditional liberties by signing up for the United States military, and they've got a whole regimen of things. Like, they put people in lines and they jab them in the butt as they walk by with their vaccines. That's just how it goes. That's a different world. But schools, little school children, shouldn't that be? What's the thing they say all the time about aborting babies? It should be between a woman and her doctor. What about injecting your children? Shouldn't that be between parents and a doctor? Shouldn't they get exactly the right thing for them based on their health and an honest assessment by a good doctor and a loving parent? Shouldn't that be the way it's done instead of the schools being involved? But Vince, what if somebody doesn't get the vaccine and some awful thing comes to school? Well, did your kid get the vaccine? Maybe it gets stopped there. If you're so concerned about that, vaccinate your kid. Well, it's wild. It's wild. So, but she asked the question. She says, should the schools be mandating? And the president he doesn't really get into anything specific. He just gives a general answer. And you can feel the COVID-related element to it, which is, I'm not supportive of mandates. That's what Democrats do. These mandates are awful. They're tyrannical, and I'm not supportive of mandates.
Big mandate person. So, I was against mandates. Mostly Democrat governors did the mandates, and they did a very poor thing. It was, in retrospect, they made a big mistake having to do with the education of children. They lost like a year, 2 years of their lives. The mandate was a bad thing. I was against the mandate.
So is that something you'd want to?
Yes, please.
Yeah. All right. So there he is on general health concerns. I'm certain, you know what happens with these press conferences. Some tiny portion of that gets yanked out, and that's how we end up with Trump said inject some bleach into you or something. Trump never said anything like that. You psychopaths, you dishonest people. Coming up, President Trump continues his lawsuits against the legacy media, and he won a big one. We'll talk about that. And Jerry Dunleavy will join us coming up in just moments. Stay with us. Hey, good afternoon to you. It's now 4:36, News Talk 105.9 WMAL, where we're making sense of the news. Coming up, Congressman Andrew Clyde will be with us from Georgia. He's a member of the House Appropriations Committee and the Freedom Caucus. We're going to talk to him about how much power Congress should exert over the affairs of our nation's capital, Washington, D.C., and what should be done with so-called Black Lives Matter Plaza, created to memorialize the riots in 2020. It blocked off whole areas in front of the White House. Can we get those areas reopened again? Can we make it a normal street again? We'll ask Congressman Andrew Clyde. You can join us, 888-630-9625, 888-630-WMAL. The opioid crisis has been destroying so many American families now for, quite unfortunately, decades. And this week we have some news that a consulting giant known as McKinsey and Company that helped fuel the opioid epidemic agreed to pay a massive settlement to avoid criminal prosecution, according to court documents filed on Friday. McKinsey will pay $650 million to settle, in this case, its role in spurring on the opioid crisis that has upended the lives of millions of Americans, killed so many. Joining us now to react to this news, what it means and whether or not it's enough, Jerry Dunleavy is here, former senior investigator to the House Foreign Affairs Committee and the author of Kabul, the untold story of Biden's fiasco and the American warriors who fought to the end. Jerry, good to have you with us, sir.
Thanks for having me, Vince.
So let's just go back in time for a moment. What is McKinsey's role in all of this? How do they help turbocharge the opioid crisis?
Yeah, so McKinsey is a massive consulting firm, and I think that people would be shocked about how much of American business and American government they've managed to insert themselves into. And so for many, many years, they were working with big pharma companies like Purdue Pharma to help those companies peddle as many opioids and painkillers to people as possible. This became a very, very lucrative field for pharmaceutical companies and for McKinsey. And so as McKinsey worked to push all these pharma companies and help these pharma companies with navigating the legal system and the regulatory framework to get as many opioids to Americans as possible, while McKinsey was doing that, at the same time, they were consulting with the FDA, the federal agency that oversees all of this. McKinsey pushed these pharma companies like Purdue Pharma and others to push opioids to as many veterans as possible. And while McKinsey was doing that, they were consulting with the VA. And so you see how McKinsey managed to kind of play every angle on this, making money from the federal overseers and from the big pharma companies. And what this did was this turbocharged the opioid epidemic in the United States. Opioids became the leading cause of overdose deaths in the United States. And even eventually, as the U.S. finally managed to start to crack down on these bad practices by groups like Purdue Pharma and McKinsey, you now had this sort of artificially created demand in the United States for these opioids. And now we saw these pharmaceutical opioids somewhat lose their market share to even more dangerous opioids, synthetic opioids like fentanyl, backed by the Chinese producers and Mexican cartels. And so you kind of see that we are still dealing with this crisis that was in large part spurred on by Purdue Pharma and by McKinsey.
Yeah, I mean, it is really one of the most tragic stories of just grotesque corruption and devastating consequences for the American people in our history. And so now we get to a point where that McKinsey is being fined $650 million, or at least that's the settlement that they're paying. This is a deferred prosecution agreement designed to allow them to get past criminal charges. But I can't help but notice that, $650 million, it sounds like a lot to a normal person. It sounds like a lot to me. $650 million is a lot of money. But then I go back and I was like, well, what other big settlements have we seen lately? Well, Fox News, that is, paid Dominion Voting Machines $787 million in that defamation case. It was a settlement over claims apparently that people had made on the air, guests or something. And so they pay a $787 million settlement for something as small as talking about election administration for one particular company. If your company is involved in, once again, the word is turbocharging the deaths of hundreds of thousands of American citizens, how do you end up with just a $650 million settlement?
Absolutely. And keep in mind that is a large amount of money to us, but to a consulting firm like McKinsey that makes billions and billions of dollars, this is not very much money in the grand scheme of things to them. And the big thing is that it allows them to avoid prosecution. Out of all of this, one former McKinsey official is pleading guilty to destruction of records. And that's the only prosecution that's coming out of this. If you read the deferred prosecution filings, you see that this is a rock solid prosecution case if the Biden DOJ actually wanted to pursue it. But McKinsey is very happy, I think, to, in their minds and in what they would hope the American public would think, is that this is now behind them.
Right. And
this is them kind of clearing the decks. The Biden DOJ, I think, is doing them a big favor by helping them dodge an easy prosecution for something that contributed to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of people. And now McKinsey, in my view, is probably going to try and set itself up to go back to its lucrative consulting as a new Trump administration comes in. But part of why I did my Twitter thread on this morning and why I'm talking about it is McKinsey is a problem. We could talk for a long time about the role that they played in turbocharging the opioid epidemic, but they have lied about the work that they have done in China and for the Chinese government, helping the Chinese government put together one of its 5-year plans. McKinsey has inserted itself into making huge amounts of money from the DOD, from the IC, the VA, our intelligence agencies, our Pentagon. They make tons of money doing this stuff. And they have been one of the leading pushers of DEI in Fortune 500 companies, pushing into them and helping the federal government, especially the Biden administration, justify this massive growth in left-wing radical DEI policies. McKinsey has been behind a lot of that as well. So this is a nefarious organization. They make a lot of money from a lot of different federal agencies, from a lot of different companies. Mm-hmm. They make money in China. They have worked with Russian state-owned defense companies, Chinese companies, Chinese state-owned entities, the Chinese government, and have misled Congress about their work in China. And so I think that there is a lot potentially for a Secretary Hegseth, for an Attorney General Bondi to look into, and maybe for an Elon Musk over at Doge to see if we really need to be paying McKinsey all this money.
And McKinsey is also the firm that Pete Buttigieg used to work at, correct?
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Mayor Pete cut his teeth as a consultant at McKinsey, and I honestly think that he's a great representative of the sort of way that they do things, and they manage to insert themselves into things. But then when they actually get their hands on power, like him over at the Transportation Department, they screw it up.
Right, and he distanced himself. He distanced himself from McKinsey too. Remember when he was running? People were pointing out, well, wait a second, weren't you involved in fixing bread prices in Canada, making it so that it was more expensive for people to buy bread at their local supermarket? And he was, oh no, I had nothing to do with that. And he pretended like McKinsey was just a very small chapter in his life.
Absolutely, but it's a part of how he got his big start, and more broadly, it's just all of these are just great examples of how McKinsey does business. Look, they are doing work as we speak for the intelligence community. They are doing work as we speak for the Pentagon. They make a lot of money in the federal government, and they've done a lot of damage with the opioid epidemic. But their work in China is very concerning to me. Yes. And they in my view, straight up lied to Congress, trying to mislead Congress about the extent of their work there. And I think that's a huge problem. I think that companies like this, when they're doing work for the federal government, especially when they're doing work for the Pentagon and the intelligence community and getting access to all of this information related to our national security, they can't be doing work for our foreign adversaries. But that's what McKinsey did.
I do wonder to what extent this will continue to be litigated anyway, despite the fact that there's a settlement here. I wonder, of course, what an incoming Trump Justice Department will think of all of this, this idea that they have a settlement from any criminal liability. Also, as I recall, the Sackler family with Purdue Pharma, they had a case. This involves civil liability. They went all the way to the United States Supreme Court, and the court ruled that the Sackler family couldn't be shielded from liability for civil claims, which was a really big decision. That was earlier this year in June. So my guess is, Jerry, that despite the fact that we have this headline, it may not be the last word on the subject.
Well, look, I think that the Biden Justice Department, as it often has done a great disservice here. They have made it much more difficult for a Trump Justice Department to pursue criminal charges in this. Have they made it impossible? I don't think so. But it is going to be more difficult now because deferred prosecution agreements like this definitely help with shielding McKinsey from criminal prosecution. I think it's much more difficult now. I don't think it's impossible. It's certainly something that I hope the Trump Justice Department takes a look at and sees if there's some holes they can punch in this agreement. And look, earlier this year, a senior managing partner for McKinsey, I think, lied to Congress about McKinsey's work in China, trying to pretend like McKinsey had not done work for the Chinese government or the Chinese Communist Party, when I think that the evidence is very strong that is exactly what McKinsey did. Lying to Congress is a federal crime. And I hope that the Trump Justice Department looks into that as well. And more broadly, I hope that the incoming Trump administration takes a real hard look at all of the work that McKinsey is getting paid by U.S. taxpayers to do for the federal government, and hopefully decides that this is not a company that U.S. taxpayers need to be funding.
Yeah, and guess what country is fueling the opioid crisis in the United States right now? China. China is doing that.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Unbelievable. Jerry Dunleavy, thank you as always for your relentless investigation and analysis. Thank you, sir.
Anytime, Vince.
Great to talk to you. There he is, Jerry Dunleavy. It's 4:50 now. Did you know that the bald eagle is not actually officially the national bird of the United States? Did you know that? I didn't know that. Members of Congress are looking to resolve that today. This is the right period to do that. It's the lame duck period, so if you're going to get something that's totally non-controversial through, now's the time. The Washington Examiner reports today the U.S. could finally make the bald eagle its national bird after centuries of confusion. The U.S. is set to finally designate the bald eagle as the national bird. After centuries of appearing on the country's seal, the bird does appear on our national seal and those of nearly every federal agency, despite popular belief that the bald eagle has already received this honor and some government departments touting its status as the national bird in official documents. That's the government lying to you. The bird has never received the designation. But all of that could change this week when the House votes on a bill to name the bald eagle the national bird. Senator Mark Wayne Mullen had co-introduced the legislation. There's 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats on this in the Senate. The bald eagle has long been a symbol of freedom and patriotism for our nation. It's only fitting we officially designate the bald eagle the national bird of the United States. I'm glad to join my colleagues on this introduction. You know, the U.S. Great Seal, the Examiner details, was first approved by Congress in 1782, fresh from our War of Independence from the British Crown. The seal features a bald eagle at the center. It's an image that, of course, has been replicated by all the federal agencies through the years. As a result, many have conflated the bird as being the country's national symbol, but it hasn't been officially, not until perhaps this week. We do have a national mammal, though. The bison is our national mammal. We need more bison-themed. Yes, Corey says he knew that one. Corey knows lots of stuff. The bison is the national mammal. I think he thanks Teddy Roosevelt for that one. Yeah, Teddy, he was a big fan of the bison, very impressed by it. Believed he saved it from extinction, too. Yeah. We need more bison-themed parties. I love the Eagles. Trust me. I'm speaking of Corey. Corey was Screech the Eagle for the Washington Nationals. Corey knows. Corey's a big Eagle guy. He likes Eagles. But maybe there's room for the bison, too, you know? Maybe President Trump will make the bison great again. We could elevate that national symbol. All right, stay with us. Ahead, Congressman Andrew Clyde not just voting on bald eagle legislation this week. In fact, he'd like to see Congress exert a little bit more control over the affairs of Washington, D.C., because this is a town that definitely can't run itself. Stay with us.